with the basic definition of terms. Do we know what disinformation is? What kind of animal is it? And how is it different as a tool or a tactic from what we already know? Please, let us know what disinformation is and the role that the media can, particularly right now, play in solving the challenge. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Viva, Kenya, viva. I've always wanted to say that myself. All right, first of all, I just want to see the energy in this room. It's fantastic, and it's good to see so many young people engaged with the subjects that we're discussing today. Democracy is an important issue, and it's one that we should all take charge of, and I don't think I need to be Now, disinformation. So, I think simply put, disinformation is any information that is published with the intent to lie, to inform, to disinform, to misinform people, right? So it's the intention behind why someone is putting out, a certain aspect of information, right? So, for instance, if I were to go out there and say today that there were 250 people here, I don't really know the number, I'm just estimating, or I was told, and I'm well-intentioned in saying so, then that's misinformation, right? But if I come and say, this event was only attended by 3 guys, 4 guys, and it wasn't a success, and you understand, so that's disinformation, but I intend to be seen. So that's really just a limit. And then of course, Anjiro, Eric, and all of us here can talk about the different kinds of, there's malinformation, misinformation, misinformation, different kinds or subsets of, misinformation generally, that then you can start to distinguish, okay, am I looking at something that was published with the intent to misinform, or this was just misleading information, and the intent wasn't to misinform? So that's how you start to look at it. Now, in terms of journalism, I think this is one of the most important things that we do as journalists today, right? So we can't compete with the news cycle. We can't publish faster than Twitter. We can't publish faster than Instagram or TikTok. So what we as journalists are supposed to do is to do 2 or 3 things to provide context. So why is what is happening, right? To fact check. Is what is happening truly happening? Is what those people are saying true? Like I think a great piece of fact checking happened on the news. Was it 1 or 2 days ago? But Waroi Wakwapi, right? You were told that the price of fuel and cooking oil in Ruido is. What did the journalists from Citizen TV do? They went directly to the supermarkets and fact-checked that information. So that's a crucial part of journalism today. It's not just to report the news, but to verify the quality of the information you get. And third is to look at systems. What systems are creating the ecosystem where we can then now have misinformation and information, etc. There's lots more to say about this. Thank you, other people.
Thank you so much, John, for that. Normative, setting norm for what this information will be for the sake of this panel and our audience. Now, the Independent Electoral Commission has been one such body. We are talking about democracy and disinformation that has been subject to this disinformation campaigns meant to discredit its work as well as neutrality. Very important. Recently, in the last elections, there was a particular screenshot on Twitter showing the chair of the commission on WhatsApp that having a WhatsApp communication with him and a group of politicians in the same group. Now, what is the commission? How did disinformation play a part in the last election? And what are you currently doing in order to avert this in the future?
Thank you for that question. I'll first of all answer that question into the video. First of all, as a computer scientist, and my background of computing, the technology of computing has evolved over many years from the basic input, processing, and output design to analytical and visualization technologies that have been put in place. And currently, we are in a generation of artificial intelligence. Why am I saying this? There is a lot of content that is now being generated that is not authentic, that has been manipulated, right? And this is the area of artificial intelligence and machine learning, whereby you may have two images overlaid over each other, or texts overlaid over each other, and communicating or disseminating a narrative that is not the truth. And that is being done through models, computer-generated artificial intelligence models, and it is being used to misinform the public about a certain narrative. Many of you have used Twitter, many of you have used TikTok, many of you have used Snapchat. Some of the messages that are being disseminated on TikTok are actually not authentic. They are manipulated, they are generated by computer algorithms. And you may find my face and my voice communicating or generated by an algorithm, and it is not my message. So it confuses the public. So coming now to the message that was generated from or during the election about the commission, the chairman of the commission having a conversation with a certain politician. That is the same thing that we are trying to say. It was computer generated and edited to convey a narrative that was not true. So, based on that, it is the commission now role to engage with the media and the citizens so that the right information is communicated and delivered through our journalists, our media houses, so that the right communication, the right information is delivered. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Silas. That is a good segue to bring in Caroline. The current interventions and initiatives that are currently working towards combating disinformation have been termed as outnumbered, fragmented, underfunded, and sometimes complacent. Now, is there a policy gap? Should we change policies? I know you've worked a lot in terms of advancing legislative processes and agendas. What can we do in order to have an effective and efficient counter disinformation processes in Kenya from a policy perspective?
Yes, thank you, Willis, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me first start by saying it's been a while since I was in a room with so much energy. So just echoing John Allen, how exciting it is to be in this space and to be reminded of things that are really impactful and that count, not just for your generation, but for ours as well. So it's true, really, that yes, we are working in the legislative space, but let me start by saying a couple of years ago, maybe about 3 years ago, when you talked about misinformation and disinformation, you were probably more worried about fake news, a fake poster. If you are Mzalendo Trust, you are worried that somebody has published a fake scorecard that they have said came from Mzalendo Trust that it did not. And that was easy to correct. If you are the Nation Media Group, you were worried about a fake headline, such as I think there was something similar to that on Tuesday. But this space has really changed, especially in the last 2 years. And let me say, with what we've been calling the era of post-truth, where lies are more impactful than truth. And so when you then speak about that, the knowledge that is coming in, let's talk about chat GPT, the different forms of disinformation, deep fakes, fake news, and malinformation. The legislative and regulatory space is not coping. And recently I was in a meeting, and one of the things that was highlighted is the fact that when you speak about the big tech companies, whether you're talking about Meta, whether you're talking about X, whether you're talking about Amazon Web, those companies on their own are bigger than nations. They are bigger than countries. They are bigger than continents. And so if you think about the wealth and the control, I mean, Meta can run off the president of the most powerful nation on earth, and he has no recourse. And they decide you're not coming back to Facebook, you're not coming back to X, and that happens. On the same breath, they can decide that if the elections in Kenya or in Nigeria or in South Africa, they can shut down the internet or throw to the internet, and there's very little you can do because there are no laws, not just here, but across the world to govern how we operate. And so the concern that has been raised is that you're dealing with institutions that are outside the legislative frameworks of international organizations. And so globally, not just in Kenya, it's a problem. Coupled with that is the fact that the knowledge that we have is not moving fast enough. And so if you think about our laws and the technology that we are seeing, we are probably 10, 15 years behind. And the third thing is, of course, as you pointed out, there is no resources. Resources have not been put into this place because we've not, up to maybe 2-3 years ago, we've not really thought about the impact of technology on democracy. And we are seeing a very related correlation, especially when it comes to building up of mistrust between the political class, distortion of information, manipulation of elections. And one of the things that you're seeing is across the world, if you look at the recent elections in the Philippines, for example, you're having electoral results and presidents that have been elected through manipulation of technology, and not manipulation of technology in the sense of numbers, not in the sense perhaps of the servers, as we are talking here, but in terms of behavior change, algorithm setups, and distortion of facts and information that leads to voters thinking one way as opposed to thinking another way. And so when it comes to all these issues and you come to the local law space, the laws are not there, the knowledge is not there. And so as Digital Trust, in partnership with other organizations, what we are trying to do now is create platforms, what we are calling platforms for agile governance, where we then hope to work with Parliament, and earlier today I was hosting a meeting also with members of county assemblies, to see whether we can begin to come up, before we even come up with the legislation, create awareness, impact the knowledge, so that members understand what is this that we are dealing with, how it impacts the electoral participation space, and then what laws either need to be amended or to be enacted, new laws enacted to address the challenges.
Thank you so much for that, Carola. You mentioned skill and development and capacity. And here I want to bring in the scale. You also mentioned scale, because the scale of the challenge is far much bigger than the available capabilities to react or to respond timely and in an effective manner. You have done a lot of work in terms of fact-checking and research. Do we have sufficient skills as a nation and capacity to match the scale of the challenge? How can we have more view? How can we have more fact-checkers? How can we have more researchers who feed in information real time to the public to know how to decipher fact from fiction?
Right. So let's say the simple answer to your question is no. We don't have enough people doing fact checking, people doing the work for verifying information. And the evidence for this is in your family WhatsApp groups, where literally like every auntie is there saying, oh, WhatsApp, and they send things without verifying. And the fact that the scale at which this type of information is being shared is evidence that a lot of the skills that we assume are basic in terms of understanding and processing information online are sadly lacking. And because of this type of skills gap that we've seen, we end up in situations where people are not just actively contributing to the spread of false information, they're actively also eroding trust in institutions, in people like IBC and all the others who are trying desperately to occupy these digital spaces of consuming information. And we're at a situation where there's 3 different types of people who are consuming internet online. There's the older generation, 1984, who they don't have the kind of digital skills that are necessary to do something as basic as a Google search. Then there's the millennials who have essentially grown up with the internet, who know how to verify information online, but there's still that underlying distrust of technology because, apparently Bill Gates is one who's injecting all of us with microchips to track us. And then you have Gen Z and Gen Alpha who have grown up with the internet, so literally, they are so adept at navigating these online spaces that it's essentially impossible for us to keep track of what they're seeing and what they're watching online. And in all of these instances, we've seen the type of work being done to generate false information kind of thrive because there's not enough understanding of the psychology behind why people are spreading these things and why people are sharing this information. First of all, the country we live in is very low trust. We don't trust the government, we don't trust our neighbors, we don't trust anyone. So because of that, you see something online, and the first thing you do is, if it's from the government, you need to make sure that someone else has said it before coming back and trying to verify that information, even though it's live video, it's all of those things. But we've seen what they've done. As the journalist pointing out, they're saying, in Britain, the price of things is lower. And they're saying these are things that can be very easily debunked. But because they know they can get away with it, because there's no consequences to spreading false information, we see governments and other such actors being very willing and very able to adopt the tools of generating and paying a few people online to make things go viral, make things trend, and to shut down conversations that they deem to be threatening. But this is because the work of fact-checking is incredibly slow and it's incredibly time-intensive and it's also resource-intensive because what you're doing is coming back after people have seen false information and trying to tell them what you've seen is actually false, this is the actual truth. And a lot of times there's a significant amount of time that has passed between when this information was produced and when it's being debunked. So there's that significant time gap, and then there's also the fact that it doesn't make any money, so there's no incentive for mainstream media and other such organizations working in these spaces to respond to it, to fact check, because they're already strapped for resources. There's no money in mainstream. There's no money to dedicate in the newsroom to have someone whose job it is to see what people are consuming online and to respond to it with facts. So I'd say what needs to happen more is we probably need to have a more proper approach towards things like media and information literacy. So telling people when you see something that's potentially false online, this is the first thing you need to look out for. Who is the source? Who is the intended target? What is the intention of the person sharing that message? But because we have such limited trust in institutions, first of all, we have such, I'd say, a deep-set distrust of the government as well. So we don't know who it will take to try these things, which is one of the things that Fungo was doing, using influencers and people who have trust online, people who have built audiences organically and using them as the conduits for this critical information to teach people this is how you verify information. But now you need literally a Fungo for every single social issue we have, which as it stands now is next to impossible. But I would say we probably need to start with the point at which people are learning, people are consuming information. You need to plant the understanding that not everything you see online is credible, and this is how you can verify this information for yourself.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that. And I think at that point, let me bring in Ojiro as well from Fungoa. It's very related to capacity building, training of journalists. From your work in the last elections, what are some of the lessons you learned, and what more can you do?
Thank you very much for that question. Hello everyone, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yes, I like that. Okay. So the lessons that we learned, I like what Eric said about Kenya being a low trust society, which for me, it was a bit of a paradox how we can be a low-trust society, and then we somehow manage to vote the way we voted. And I say this because there's a lot to be said about knowing that someone is going to lie to you, and then we elect them into office. So what then does that do to how we interact with government? What then does that do to what is the information that the government is putting it out, and how do we then react to that information? How do we participate democratically? What happens? Like what conversations are we having now that we have, like blatantly elected, an administration that believes in propaganda administration? Another thing that we learned, with the work that we did, that amplification is very, very important. That it doesn't matter what good work you're doing, it's important for you to amplify, because we know that the lie moves much, much, much faster than the truth. And so for us, even as and anyone working within the information space, it is not that we do not know how to fact check, it is how do we amplify this thing. In a world of lies, in a world of so many things that are happening, how do we amplify it? If we're going to do any reports, if we're going to develop any kits, if we're going to develop any resources, how do we make sure that these resources actually get to the people? And I think that was the greatest lesson, and also the greatest challenge. How do we reach as many people as possible? We also learned there's also something to say about collaboration, because we are a collaborative journalism project. And when we look at disinformation, it cannot be one bullet killing everything that is going on. So it has to be collaborative. There's training, there's amplification, there's developing of resources and research, all of these things. So we really found out that misinformation and disinformation is very wide, and that you cannot use one thing to try and tackle it. So there's a lot of collaboration that needs to be done. Collaboration with the media, collaboration with the civil society, collaboration with professionals like doctors and people who are professionals and things that are actually affecting people with regards to disinformation. Just the other day we released a report on online scams that are affecting women, and that is how you see that it is important for us to collaborate, because it's not a responsibility of the journalists or civil society only, but everyone in the profession, where there's an opportunity for people to be mis and disinformed. So I think that really emphasized on collaboration and understanding that information is not a vacuum, that all of us have something to do and a role to play in tackling mis and disinformation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Alan, the theme of this year's Democracy Day is powering the next generation. You represent young people, you also work with young people. Disinformation, creates a climate of uncertainty and distrust. And what we see in Kenya is that the system is designed to drive citizens away from public forums and to throw their hands in the bewilderment at the onslaught of misleading and contradictory information that they come across. And the key to this are young men and women, mostly in urban settings, unemployed and therefore with lots of time to spend online. And in the process, they amplify disinformation, either wittingly or unwittingly. So, from your perspectives, and the audience is primarily young people, how can we empower the next generation with respect to disinformation to be critical thinkers, to grow up knowing how to distinguish fiction from fact, to have these essential critical thinking skills that are essential in terms of understanding misinformation and disinformation?
Thank you so much. My name again is Alan Chacha. I'm the CEO of USP, that is University of Colleges Student Peace Association of Kenya. First, I'll begin by saying that one, I'm a youth, I'm still a youth. I wish you would have seen my picture just in 2015 when I was found. In 2015, I was a student. Of course, I must submit that maybe I'm slightly older than most of you, but I can't tell you that I'm a youth. I'm maybe so in regard to how we can be able to empower our young people, the first thing is we actually need to create this kind of forums. Because without proper information, there is nothing completely you can be able to do. Then number two, I think in terms of the older generation, also need to trust the youth and give them space to really implement their ideas without a lot of distrust. And I speak this from a point of fact, because when I was founding the organization, I think there was a lot of challenges that we faced. One, by that time I was a student, serving as a student leader, and then you'll find that you will go, people will really think that this is a very good idea. They will actually tell you that write a concept, bring. The next thing, after 1 week or so, you find that the same person you went to present the idea, the same person is implementing the same idea without even with mistakes. And this is one of the things that has made many young people actually shy away from one presenting their information. And with that one, you find that more young people are not actually being empowered. In regard to the social media, because this is the topic of the day, I think as young people, we also it's according that we need to come out, we need to speak for ourselves. And you cannot, if you sit and you don't speak, I can tell you, nobody will give you that platform. I'll give an example. In 2017, I worked in the universities. I coordinate activities in universities, colleges, and TVs. In 2017, we realized that voter registration was taking place while students were on session. And while the registration was taking place, you could only be able to register in the institute, in where the DVR kits are. For example, if you register in Nairobi, that means you voted in Nairobi. But how many students come from different places? And university is the face of care. So we went to IBC and told them that you are doing voter registration. The time that our students are in session, we want you to open DVR kits so that the student will be able to register in the institution. And once they have registered, then you allow them to vote from their places. Of course, it was very difficult because it was a policy issue. It took a lot of time. But the last week of the 2017, IBC accepted and took the DVR kits. Then from there, in this time, we saw the registration at least in 2022. They took the entire. But again, in the process, we realized that one, majority of the students have never participated in, for example, even in election. Number two, also they have never participated as observers. We went to IBC and told them, we want you to empower and accredit students so that for the first time they can be able to participate as observers. The IBC accepted and accredited 400 observers and people who want to follow closely. And these young people, they got a platform for them to be empowered. And why am I bringing all this? I'm bringing all this just to trigger the mind of all of us, especially the stakeholders and all this. That one, you need to create a platform for these young people, and don't say, our money, we think that if we give you money, you don't have system. If you do this, that is the language that most people have used, just to make a young person as a mobilizer. But we are not mobilizers. Young people are not mobilizers. Give them that mistake and allow them to implement while they mentor. And that is the only way you'll be able to empower this generation, and you will be able to get the Kenya that you want. Viva Kenya, viva! Viva! Viva Kenya, viva! Viva! Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. That's a good segue. You mentioned election observation to bring in William Sau, who was the lead of non-state actors observation program. And from your perspective and your observation findings before, during, and after elections, how did disinformation manifest itself? And what are some of your findings? And what did you recommend moving to the future in the next election?
Thank you very much. Our work as election observers is basically to monitor electoral processes, to be able to give an opinion how we feel based on the information that we collected, how the election is conducted. Now, in terms of the teaching, and the other good thing about even coming to class in this one, I will say everything that they say. The issues which are
we can't hear you. Pardon. We can't hear you. Too low.
Manisikia sasa? Ni mic. Sio mimi. It's supposed to do its work. Anyway, yeah, I was saying that the work of election observers is to ensure that we track a process, we collect data on an electoral process, so that we can be able to give an opinion. Moving forward. To other people. Last, the money process, the money industry, then the elections. Which one has much more lies between the two? How come we are not, we don't get so much light when it comes to our money issues? But we have fake information about our banks, or we run to the bank to collect our money because something has happened. There's a cultural issue. There's a cultural issue the way we conduct ourselves. We trust some institutions, we don't trust other institutions. So my last recommendation, therefore, especially on matters to do elections, is that for IBC, where my friend Silas and our good colleague was in the morning, is to ensure there's transparency, ensure there's a people-centered approach to the conduct of the election. IBC saying, so that hakuna brokers of katikati, because the minute you put brokers in between the agency which is supposed to conduct elections and the people, we are inviting bad political manners, which was spoken about very eloquently. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really insights there. Moving to the next step, which is more of looking at the future. What does the future hold? You know, disinformation is very economically paying. It is profitable for many people who are involved. And in Kenya, we even have the so-called keyboard warriors. So in terms of the next steps, starting with you, Alan, looking at the information ecosystem, the role that journalism plays. And by the way, in Kenya, media and civil society are the most trusted institution. So the trust already is there, particularly with respect to media and the civil society. But what else can we do in order to have a robust, information ecosystem that can be equal to the task?
Okay, so there's 2 or 3 things. The first is what we're doing here, which is talking about it, right? So as far as we can, we need to really educate one another about what these things are, what they mean, and how they manifest in each of our lives. The second is culture. Ule put it very eloquently. If we want our country to change, the first thing that we do isn't to change our leaders. Changing leaders is like changing clothes, right? But you can change clothes and still smell bad. You really need to be able to, you need to be able to take a shower, take a bath, and then now you'll be able to change something about yourself, which is culture, right? But the third, and this might be something that some people disagree with, is the place for profit in a business is the same place where people complain the most. So if misinformation and disinformation is a place where people are constantly complaining, then it means that someone can profit from it. Now someone is already profiting from it. You mentioned troll farms, you mentioned people just creating misinformation and misinformation, malinformation, etc. What's the flip side to that? Who are the people who can then now make their names out of profiting or from giving you, credible information? It sounds like credible information should be a public good, but because we are a low trust or even low trust society, a trustless society, and it's not just Kenya but across the world. Why is it that people are looking at Bitcoin, for instance? Because they don't trust, they don't trust their own currencies. They don't want to be conned. Why is it that people are turning to technology, artificial intelligence, etc., to be able to do certain things for them? It's because they do not trust one another. So who are the people who are going to emerge as the new champions of leading credible information, etc.? It should be journalism, because that's been our job traditionally. But I can tell you it won't be journalism, because journalism itself is also under threat. It is under-sourced, it's under-resourced, it's under-trained, it's spread too thin. So we either build up the capacity of journalists to be able to do this long-term, widespread, or find the commercial value in creating pools of credible information. That's how then things can move forward. I think the other thing is really about thinking about the impact of artificial intelligence. I can't remember who it was on the panel. I think it was Yuki who said it, right? So thinking about the impact of artificial, it's going to change our lives in very, very fundamental ways, specifically the information ecosystem. We have to not only think about it, but participate in building our own organizations, our own platforms that then we can trust, right? There's one thing to be in a trustless, environment, but what's worse is that we have platforms where people, run by people and organizations that really don't care about whether you're misinforming a Kenyan during an election. It means that the development and the innovation for what comes next must come from there, must come from Africa, it must come from young people, right? So instead of giving all of your data to TikTok, or giving all of your data to Twitter and what have you, you really need to start thinking about and supporting those people who are innovating around solutions to the problems that you face on a daily basis, to the things that you know, right? To answer bad. Because if we do not do that, we will not only be left behind in terms of misinformation, etc., we'll continue to be victims, but we will also be left behind in the global race to be able to define what our future is. So again, there's a lot, it's a big question that you're asking, but there's really a few things that we need to do. But of all of these things, if we were to start something, the first place is where we know the end, which is with culture. Cultures create societies. Societies create civilizations. Civilizations create legacies. What is your legacy as a young person? Being able to create the new culture, right? The things that you're doing today, like what happened in Eldoret, right? With a young lady questioning the senator, etc. Those things, those habits, those create cultures. Make sure that the positive cultures that you're creating around the information ecosystem are such that you can leave them to another generation to pick up from there. Because, as I will tell you, you will not be young forever. You won't be young forever. Sitting here now, you are aging, you are set okay, right? So use the time and the energy that you have today to create the legacy for tomorrow. You guys messed up, leave the stages outside.
Thank you so much. At this point, we will bring in questions. We have audiences joining us virtually from different locations. We'll also have a few questions from the floor here, so you should be ready with your questions or comments to any of our panelists.
Okay, so we can begin with our online audience. Remember, we've got Marsabit, we have Mombasa and Kisumu who are joining us virtually. So if you could please, Abdul, have the questions here. This is from Bulo James, says, my name is Jamal from Marsabit. If most of our elected leaders are not adhering to the rule of law, how can we embrace democracy? Okay. Important question there. That's from Marsabit. I think we had some questions from Kisumu and Mombasa as well. If you could have those, and then we can take 2 or 3 from the floor. Ochieng Bam says the executive has captured the legislature with members of parliament dancing to the presidency's guitar. Who then can be trusted with the role of providing oversight? And is this trend good for our Olympic democracy? That's Ochieng Bam from Kisumu. Thank you so much for that question. And we have our final question from Mombasa. From Kisumu. This is Imelda Miyere from the great county of Kisumu. Says, I'm interested in knowing the position and way to move regarding young people, specifically women in leadership. I'm a young woman interested in politics, but my ambitions have been met by me being unmarried and young. How can we as a nation move past this so that more young people, especially women, can comfortably compete with the likes of a young Nyong'o without our efforts being thwarted? Thank you. Okay, maybe we start with those and then we'll take one question from here. This is a large audience, maybe 2 from here and 1 from the end.
From the back, I think the first question was more on the title, and the next one on law, the role of law and the legislative capture. Caroline, do you want to respond to that?
All right. Let me first start by making a comment, and especially because we have many IT people here. When we were doing computer classes, you used to say garbage in, garbage out. And that really is how I would summarize the value system of the country. That what we are seeing online is what's also happening offline. So think about some of these issues as Moshene in different versions, accurate, inaccurate, with salt, without salt. And if you don't address those issues offline, even when it comes to issues of content creation, content moderation, what you're sharing online, how you're defaming or misaligning or maligning other people's reputations, that's not likely to change. So just then to say that even as we are thinking of regulations and legislations, we really have to think about the value sets that Mule and John Allen have talked about. Coming to the question, I'll start the last one with from Uche. Separation of powers is just about oversight and legislative capture. It's a thing that we have spoken about. If you looked at our latest scorecard that was released in June, it's one of the concerns that we addressed. And we do know that the Constitution provides for separation of powers. And this is important because if you do not have your member of parliament asking the hard questions about where your budgets are going, who is being appointed, are they vetting the right people into office, are they making laws that address citizen needs, then you find yourself having an issue. But having said that, Kenya is political party system. Political parties have a lot of sway, and what you are seeing now, if you look at the current parliament, for example, there's almost an absolute majority in terms of the ruling party, and we also have the theme of the ruling party, that's the executive, also has a majority in parliament, so that complicates issues. Having said that, I think then citizens and civil society organizations such as ourselves have a very key role to play in watching the watchman. That's how we frame ourselves, that we watch, because the parliament is supposed to be the watchman over the executive. There needs to be another layer of a watchman who is keeping an eye on what parliament is doing, who is keeping an eye on executive decisions that are slipping through parliament and calling those out. So being able to advance accountability and demand for accountability, and that really then ties on to the first question. How do you ensure that in an environment where there is no adherence to the rule of law, someone is keeping the leadership accountable? Citizens come in. During the Olaus dance, there was talk about recall. What are some of the provisions? And for us as an institution, we believe that's part of the work that we do. When we tell you whether your member of parliament is working or not working, we are asking you make a decision or demand more than what you are currently getting. So to say that it's not lost, we must continue to demand separation of powers between the three arms of government and the two levels of government. But even as we are doing that as citizens and civil society organizations, we do our role by making sure that we have the right information and therefore making sure that the information we have is accurate, asking the questions, participating in those sessions, demanding that the participation then is meaningful and not tokenistic, and working in partnership with the media. A lot of the work that civil society organizations do finds itself on pages of the newspaper, because that's why we demand accountability. And for example, now if you look at the Tuesday example, you could see that you had CSS in one room, you had colleagues from civil society organizations in another room debunking the information, and so creating these sort of partnerships then becomes very critical to ensure that even though the constitutional provided process may not be working so effectively, there's a third way that we are doing things to demand accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. And sir, you want to add something?
Just a quick one. Anybody who breaks the law in a democracy is not a democrat. So stop asking a question about somebody who is not a democrat. Democracy is for the future, is for the young people, and embrace it. Those who do not practice it, let's not have them as our leaders. Secondly, on the question of the members in parliament who jumping ship from one side to the other, they ought to resign. It's a very simple story. Resign, go for re-election, come back with a party that you want to support you and represent your people. Again, simple.
Great. And then there was a question on gender. You want to take that? I know we also have a number of he for she's here, but comment on that.
Yes, the question of gender with regards to democracy, I think I'm going to talk about it with regards to the online space. And how the digital space treats women with opinions or women with a public-facing career. Unanisikia? Unanisikia ama msikii? Na sasa? Oh, okay. Okay, so the thing about, there's something we call gender disinformation, where like everybody faces cyberbullying and cyber harassment. But then when it comes to women and it comes to young women, when it comes to women with a public-facing career or public-facing opinions, there's a sort of cyberbullying that happens to women that does not like necessarily happen to men. So I'm talking about sexist and misogynistic attacks, which we have seen on the rise, especially from the last election and this election. And the thing that I usually say about online gender-based violence is that violence is violence. It doesn't matter whether it doesn't matter the platform that you're using. So we've seen a rising case of women being attacked, and not just women politicians, but even in the recent past we've seen celebrities like Asia being attacked, and I really want to appreciate the fact that we are starting to take these kinds of people to court. We are starting to understand that you can block people who are constantly insulting you. We are starting to understand that it is also possible for you to attack back. But when it comes to attacking back, you must attack back with the awareness that you might be attacking back at a mad person. So you attack back and then they attack you back in a way that would send you to hospital. So I usually advise that with a pinch of salt. Sometimes attacking back can require awareness. So I appreciate the fact that that some of these bullies are being taken to court. And I also want to speak even about platform accountability. We've seen platforms coming out to say that we protect women and we do that. But every time there's a rise, for example, I think a month ago we were trying to handle a case of young women whose online pictures had been shared. Whose nude pictures had been shared online. And we had a really long back and forth with the platforms trying to get them to bring that down. So there's also the thing of platform accountability, which we need more people to speak about with regards to protecting the most vulnerable people using the online platforms. Another thing that I'm very, very concerned about is TikTok. And I'm concerned about TikTok because of the kind of content that we're seeing on TikTok. TikTok has sort of revolutionized, how we do content. We're seeing more content in native language, in mother tongue, in vernacular languages. So what that means is that everything that we are doing, in the online space with regard to cyberbullying, we must think about doing that in other languages. So if we're talking about mental health, online mental health, we must talk about online mental health in Kikuyu, online mental health in Kigiriama, because a lot of the people who are now producing the content on TikTok are doing that in their language. So how do you communicate that to them in a way that they will understand? Misinformation is also being done in vernacular. So if we are doing all this work in English, we are excluding a very, very large number of people. So there's a lot of work to be done. We don't have all the answers, and there's also not one solution for what is going on in the online space. The online space is another reality of its own, which is a reflection of our own reality. Which is a reflection of what is going on in the offline, in the offline environment. So whatever laws and rules that we have in the offline world must be transferred onto the online world. And I think there's also the need to also understand how do we consume information, how do we learn, how to learn about information. There's also any different languages.
Wonderful. At this point, we'll have questions from the floor. Will we take any questions from the floor?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Halima Kahia from Wajir County. I have two questions. One goes to IBC. When it comes to election, we come from an area which is 90% voter assistance. And this voter assistance
we have a very big challenge when it is the IEBC officials who are marking for them. And they usually take advantage of the illiterate pastoralist community, whereby they don't allow their next of kin to mark for themselves. And we have seen that has led to a lot of gender violence, whereby the husband and the wife collide because already he knows whom she voted for. So as an IEBC, is there any mandate that allows voters to be assisted by the next of kin so that the information is not shared openly? My second question goes to Eric. Eric, thank you. I'm a frequent user of PESA Check. I've been trained on fact checking by Code for Africa. And the fact information on PESA tool is factual, informative, but it can become misinformation. Background bit of So how can we incorporate in the tool what is being implemented at the counties, because it is totally different? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, unfortunately, because of time, we have to end the questions from the floor there. So the panelists can please respond, and then we can conclude with this session. Unfortunately, because of time, we have to be out of here exactly 5.
Yes. Thank you for that question, madam. And I think your question is very valid, and I understand where you come from. I think it's more of a voter awareness or education on that aspect, because the law as it is currently provides that a voter can nominate anybody to assist him or her, so that you can come with your spouse or your next of kin to come and assist you if you are assisted voter. So it is an issue of awareness about the provisions in the law, so that the voters during voter education, I think that message needs to be emphasized. So that it is at the worst case, if the voter does not come with an assistant, then it is the responsibility of the election official or the presiding official to assist. So I think it's an issue of awareness. And then you have the agents. With the agencies available to witness that assisted voter. Thank you. And then
yeah, thank you. It's good to hear that you've been using PESA. So PESA is a tool by Code for Africa that has all the information on budget allocations from the national government to the counties, and also all the information from the county annual and integrated development plans. So it's really important for you to get this information. It's public, but a lot of times when the government is sharing these things, they put it out in like 60-page PDF documents. So what we're doing, or what Code for Africa is doing now, is taking this information and making it accessible to you as the ultimate beneficiaries of these allocations. So when you ask about it potentially becoming misinformation, this information is drawn directly from the documents that are published by the government. So one of the ways that you can use this information is you can go to the public hearings and the platforms where public participation happens, and then you ask, like it says here that you allocated, say, 5 billion to building schools, but we're not seeing any schools being built. What does that mean? So that you're not going into a public participation forum to just ask questions without any information, but you actually have the information you can use. And then also for journalists who are then able to see this is how much money was allocated to this specific function, but let's say if it's hospitals and medicine, there's no medicine in these hospitals, but money has been allocated and it's been recorded as spent. So how can you use this information that is already publicly available to hold the government accountable? And then it's also good that Ombudsman was here, because one of the things that happens is if this information is not published, you can go and ask for it, and then they're required by the law to respond to you within 21 days. So there's a lot of tools and a lot of data and a lot of information that you can use as a citizen to hold the government accountable. And then one of the things that politicians and other public figures will do is they will go and say, we can't build a road, or we can't build a school, we can't do this particular thing because we haven't gotten money from the national government. But it shows you how much money is actually in your county accounts. So how can you, as someone who lives in a particular ward, see how much money has been allocated. Because as has been said a lot of times on this today, democracy goes beyond just elections. It's about using the information you have to benefit yourself and the people around you. How are you able to, and this also answers the question I was coming to soon, how can you engage as a citizen with the government that's in place? How can you, as someone who has access to this information, then take it to the places that don't have access to internet, for example, places that don't have access to these documents, and tell them, you're meant to have this. This is not a favor that the government is doing, that requires the law to do this. So you should take this information and be a fact checker wherever you are or wherever you live, so that when it's time for accountability, you have all the information, you can use it for your own benefit. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Eric. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all we had time for. Let us give it up for our great panelists. Once again, I wish you a great, happy International Day of Democracy.